There has been a lot of controversy and discourse around the live action Snow White movie, and I really don't think that it's the dumpster fire that everyone wants you to think it is. However, I'm not going to lie to you and sit here and say it's a great movie. It's not a great movie. And I'm also not going to sit here and tell you to go watch it because there's so many things that are preventing people from watching it, like political views and the quality of the live action Disney movies that people are starting to grow tired of, which is understandable and I respect. Political views or human right views as far as Rachel Zegler playing Snow White, who is pro-Palestine, and Gal Gadot, who is Israeli and served in the Israeli army. What also caused a lot of controversy is Rachel Zegler being cast as Snow White, and unfortunately it's because of the color of her skin, the same way Hailey Bailey was cast as Ariel, and you know, people didn't like it because she's black. Let's just be real. These movies, The Little Mermaid and Snow White, got a lot of hate before anybody saw the movie because of the color of the actress's skin. Like, that's just point blank period. Point blank period. You know, before the movies even came out, these movies got hate because of the color of the skin. And you can convince yourself otherwise, you know. And what's funny is that the loudest people complaining about these movies, about these children movies, are straight white men who... When was the last time you watched Snow White? When was the last time you watched The Little Mermaid? I guarantee you these people who are the loudest complaining about these movies, their favorite movies are Cars or one of the Marvel movies, or maybe they don't even like Disney. They just hate Disney because Disney has this woke agenda, and you know, they just want to create a hate train for these movies. And people fall for it. People fall for it, and it's really sad to see, in my opinion. Again, the movie isn't great. The movie, it was cute, you know? Like, I walked out of it like, okay, you know, it's not what I wanted. It's definitely not the cartoon. I wouldn't call it a remake. But the hate feels very, very forced. And, you know, being a Disney fan for a majority of my life, I mean, Snow White has been probably my favorite movie since I can remember. I've been watching Snow White since I can remember. I was born in 1995. It's been my favorite movie ever since. I remember I had it on VHS. I had Snow White, The Little Mermaid, Dumbo, and The Nightmare Before Christmas on VHS. I'm sure I had a lot more, but those are the 4 core childhood movies that I can remember. If you know me in person, you know I love Snow White. I mean, everything about the character I love. And so what's crazy to me is that before the live action movie even began, you know, I remember I would have conversations with other Disney fans, and so many people were saying, oh, I don't really like Snow White, or oh, the movie's whatever, oh, the cartoon is so old, it's so dated, it's so you know, like she gets kissed by unconscious by a man, and this and that, and blah blah blah. And so then the movie gets made, and they try to fix all of that, and now all of a sudden people care. Now all of a sudden Snow White is sacred to people. Now all of a sudden this movie, like, how dare you? How dare you touch this movie, and how dare you change it? None of you cared about this movie before. Like I probably met one other person who loves Snow White just as me. Hi, B. and you know what? I'll show you like all the little Snow White things I collect. Like, my husband buys me a lot of this stuff. Like, I have this little statue, so cute. I have this little thing. This is where I put my wedding ring in here at the end of the day. Really cute. Right? Yeah, some ASMR. You know, when I went to go watch the movie in theaters, they had this beanie, which I thought was really cute. I even have Snow White tattooed. It was my first ever tattoo. And I can go on and on about how much I love Snow White. The point that I'm trying to make is that before any of this, I felt like I was the only one who gave a fuck about Snow White and, you know, like the character and the movie. I felt like it became a little bit of a niche. Again, it's a classic. The original cartoon was the first ever animated movie ever made, ever released. It was a gigantic hit. It came out in 1939, Great Depression. Um, if you were to, I'm pretty sure if you were to adjust inflation numbers today, it would still be in the top 10 of movies that have made the most money of all time. I guarantee you. I think I just checked it like last week. And the Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs from 1939 that came out in the Great Depression is still within the top 10. Now that I got all of the discourse and all of the nonsense out of the way, let's actually get into the movie. So structurally, they change this movie a lot. They change it fairly enough to where I at first was kind of upset, but then I had time to think about it. That's why it took me so long to make a review, because I wanted to sit and actually think. And the way they structure the beginning of the movie, in the cartoon, it starts off with the evil queen walking up to the mirror, asking who's the fairest of them all. The mirror says, "It's not you, it's Snow White." And then our introduction to Snow White is she's in her rags, she's at the wishing well, and she's wishing for the love of her life to show up. And so in this remake, the way they start it is it introduces Snow White as a child. It shows her parents. It shows their kingdom. Their kingdom is happy. Their kingdom is joyful. The gates are open to the palace. The people living in the kingdom are happy, and the king is fair. And they make it a point to say that the king is very fair, because they change, being fair in this movie isn't just about being beautiful. If you're going to be a leader, you need to be a fair leader. And so the movie starts with Snow White's mom died, and then Snow White's dad remarries the evil queen, and the evil queen tricks the dad into starting a war with another kingdom, and it's hinted that he dies, but Snow White doesn't actually know if he actually dies. So then we're introduced to Snow White as an adult now, and after all that introduction, it wouldn't make sense for her to be like, you know what I want right now? I want a man. Now what Snow White wants is to find her dad. And, she's like, oh, you know what? My dad is probably somewhere. He's probably trapped somewhere, in prison somewhere. And once he comes back, he'll be able to fix it for me. So there's still kind of this okay, maybe Snow White, can't fix it, but my dad can fix it. And then later on in the movie, she finds out her dad's dead. And it becomes this okay, well, it's time for me to grow up and stop being a little girl, and I need to save my kingdom, and I need to stand up for the people, and I need to do these things. So it's not so much that there's this, again, the discourse of Snow White's gone woke. No, it's just the way that they're telling the story this time. It wouldn't make sense for her to be just helpless and nothing, and just, okay, well, I'm just gonna sit in this cottage and bake pies and sing to animals. And I think they felt the need that they had to change Snow White in that way, because the popular Disney princesses are Mulan and Ariel and Belle and what's her face from Brave. They stand up and they do things, and Elsa from Frozen, and they're seeing what is popular now, what Disney princesses are popular now, and they felt like they had to update Snow White. And again, going back to people complaining about how outdated the old movie was, and they changed it to what is popular now, and everybody's upset about it. Okay, I'm not that upset about it. To be honest, the movie goes through a lot of the same beats that the cartoon does. It just, they don't focus on the original story of the cartoon. They give it a lot more depth. I think they focused too much on the depth and not so much on what made the original a classic. I will say what upset me the most about this movie is that they only do 2 or 3 of the original songs from the cartoon. They do Whistle While You Work, the dwarf song Hi Ho, and then they do a little bit of the silly song where they're all dancing with Snow White, and they're yodeling and all that stuff. Those are the only 3 songs that they did from the original, and all the other songs are new songs, brand new songs to this movie, and a lot of them weren't really that great. The only new song that I actually kind of enjoyed in an ironic way was the Evil Queen got a song, and we'll get into Gal Gadot now. So Gal Gadot is not a great actress. She's never been a great actress. She was barely good in Wonder Woman, and I I credit Wonder Woman to Patty Jenkins, who directed it. I'm sure she just tried her best with Gal Gadot, but Gal Gadot is not a good actress. So with that being said, knowing Gal Gadot is not a good actress, knowing she can't sing, and knowing that the Evil Queen is going to get a song in this movie, why the hell would you cast somebody who can't act and who can't sing as the Evil Queen in a musical, right? So I don't understand that. The director's Mark Webb. Mark Webb directed one of the other Spider-Man movies. He took way too many liberties, I think, with this reimagining of Snow White, and unfortunately none of it really paid off. But let's get back into Gal Gadot. Her acting is bad. It's not as bad as... It's not horrible, but it's not good. I don't think she was bad enough to ruin this movie. What ruined this movie was the structure of the story. You can tell they had a vision, and then when everybody was complaining about, all the leaks that were coming out about this movie, they were trying to go back and change it and maybe try to make it as original, as close to the original as possible. But you can tell that there was two visions of this movie that are clashing within this movie, because originally they didn't want to do... Well, they did want to do the dwarves, but then Peter Dinklage was like, that's offensive. How dare you, as a small person, ask me to play a dwarf in Snow White? And so then Disney was like, okay, then I guess we can't cast anybody as the dwarves. So Peter Dinklage, kind of indirectly costed 7 other little people. I'm sorry, is it little people? I think it's little people. So now 7 little people who could have worked as the dwarves, none of them got a job. Now, because Peter Dinklage wanted to complain, and then he went on to play the Cosmic Avenger in whatever Marvel movie that was, and that's a giant dwarf. It's like a giant. It's a dwarf but giant. I don't know if that makes sense. So he was offended that they asked him to play Grumpy, and then he went on to play a giant dwarf. So I'm so frustrated with this movie. It really sucks, having your childhood movie get dragged through the dirt like this. It's not a fun experience, and I'm sure people have experienced it in the past with their childhood movies getting made into live action, and it's not in the public opinion of being great. So it's kind of frustrating. However, this movie I think is great for little girls. It's target audience, it's great for little girls, the target audience, not grown-ass men on the internet complaining about it because Snow White's fucking brown. By the way, they explain in the movie that this Snow White, she was born, the king and the queen were stranded in a blizzard in their horse carriage, and she had to give birth. So she gave birth to her baby in a crazy blizzard, and that's why they named her Snow White. And the mother is she has brown skin, and the father is white. So Snow White's an interracial character who's named Snow White because she was born in a blizzard. And yeah, I was like, great, that's good enough for me. I don't care what color Snow White is. What I care about is what they failed at. What I cared about the most. I cared about how was the story going to be? How close to the cartoon was it going to be? So now I'm going to get into Rachel Zegler. She's a great actress. She is probably what everybody was complaining most about this movie, which was going to be her playing Snow White and the dwarves in the movie. They were the best thing about the movie. She is an amazing actress. She's a beautiful singer. To me, she was a great Snow White. The dwarves were entertaining. They were cute. I loved them. I loved Dopey. I loved Doc. I loved Happy. I loved Sneezy. I loved Bashful. I loved Sleepy. I loved them all. Grumpy. I loved them all. They were great. The issue was, you can tell that the dwarves were not originally going to be in the movie. They felt shoehorned in, which is why this movie is probably only called Snow White and not Snow White and the Seven Dwarves. And I want to say, she's a great Snow White. They had great dwarves. Gal Gadot, she's a beautiful evil queen, which is, I guess, accurate because she's supposed to be vain with beauty. And can I also say the art, the CGI, everything. This movie was beautiful. This movie was beautiful. I think this is probably the most beautiful movie I've seen in a minute. Probably just as impressive as Mufasa, the Lion King, the one that just came out. The CGI and like the art direction of these movies have stepped it up a lot. I think what's great about the forest, the enchanted forest, or the forest when it's evil and she's running through the forest, like the CGI, the art, the colors, beautiful movie. It's almost like paintings, like the cartoon actually came to life. Like that is where this movie succeeds at being as close to the original, is that it feels like those classic Disney cartoons did come to life. So it's like the cartoon is there, but it's not acting like the cartoon. I think that's the frustrating part that frustrates me with this movie, is that it's like all the magical pieces to make this could have been a great live action. She's a great Snow White, great dwarves, beautiful sets, and they just didn't go with the original story. And I think that's where they went wrong. They just, I would say this is similar to Dumbo, the remake of Dumbo, where they had a lot of the great pieces to just make a great Dumbo movie, but they just changed it too much. They changed it way too much. Whereas I felt like Lion King and Sleeping Beauty and The Little Mermaid and Aladdin, those remakes were a lot closer to the cartoon. Whereas it seems like they're older cartoons from like 1939 and 1940, 1950. They feel the need to really change those. And I understand the parts that they need to change, but they just need to change those one parts. They don't need to change the entire movie. When all is said and done, is this movie great? No. Do I recommend going to watch this movie? No. You can wait for it on Disney Plus. They should have just released this on Disney Plus. But it's not a bad movie. It's not the movie that they want you to think it is. It's not a complete train wreck, dumpster fire. The rollout of this movie is, the controversy of this movie is a dumpster fire and a train wreck, and there's too many things that went wrong with the making and the press release of this movie. The movie itself, which is what I care the most about, I would give it a 5 out of 10. If you can ignore all of the discussion, all of the politics about a child's movie, I think you will enjoy it. It might be hard for some parents to get through, but I think it's great for little girls. I think it's a great movie for little girls. It has a great message of Snow White needing to grow up and stand up for herself. And she still gets the man in the end. So it's not like this movie is saying it's bad for little girls to fall in love, but it's also saying like, okay, yeah, but, you know, be a big girl too. You know what I mean? It's okay to be a big girl. I apologize that this was a little bit more of a rant, but I felt like there was just too much discourse around this film to just focus on just the film, unfortunately. And again, Snow White's my girl. Like, I felt like I had to kind of defend it because it's being attacked by like crazy people on the internet. But if, again, just ignore all of that, watch it for yourself, make up your own mind. You might like it, you might not.